David Langer, welcome to Super Data Brothers.
Thanks for having me on, Ryan. Appreciate it.
So, Dave, I was really keen to get you on. You just published this book, Python in Excel, step by step, and one of the things I want to talk to you about is Excel is getting tons of new features that are coming in from analytics and data science, and so. What does that mean for the data analyst or the business intelligence professional or the data scientist who's used to kind of besmirching Excel and saying, oh, you shouldn't do your work in this tool?
Not much. Let's be honest, right? Most data analyses in the world have always been done by people who do not have the title of data analyst or data scientist or BI specialist or BI developer or dashboard builder, whatever their title is, whatever kind of IT-ish technical title. Doesn't matter. Most analyses have always been done in Excel. That's not going to change anytime soon. What people need to understand is that the level of sophistication of the analyses that can be done in Excel has been dramatically increased by the investments Microsoft has made in Excel.
So let's talk about the first one of those, Python in Excel. When did this come into Excel, and what can you actually do in Excel with Python today?
Okay, so it was first released in 2023, late 2023. I got early access to it under NDA back in May of 2023. And when I saw that, I was like, okay. For years, like on my YouTube channel, if you go to my YouTube channel, you'll see that for years, I've been posting various kinds of videos for how people could do more advanced types of analytics using out-of-the-box features of Excel. Once I saw Python and Excel, I'm like, okay, they just blew the lid off because you're going to have access to the primary libraries that are used the world over in Python to do more advanced analytics. If you want to use the term data science, we could argue about what that means. We could just use it, for example, just for the sake of argument, data science, right? So machine learning, market basket analysis, text analytics, all of these libraries are provided as part of Python and Excel. And that provides access to between 700 and 1 billion potential users worldwide. So it essentially, what you should think about it is that Excel's always been an analytics tool. I mean, if you're a financial analyst and you're creating a model, you're trying to predict the future. That's what you're trying to do. That's the whole point of the model. So doing analytics and that sort of thing in Excel is nothing new. It's always been done there. What Microsoft has done with Python and Excel, and in particular, also with them integrating Copilot, the AI, into Excel, is they're basically saying, look, we should have do-it-yourself analytics or do-it-yourself data science, if you want to think of it that way, for every Excel user, because Copilot will be there and can help them. And behind the scenes, Copilot's generating Python code, just like ChatGPT and all the other LLMs do to actually do magical things with your data.
Yeah. So what are the essential skills someone needs? Say, I want to dive into Excel, this Python stuff. It's cool. It sounds cool. I want to run some market basket analysis or do some predictive analytics. Where do I start? What's the first thing I should learn when it comes to Python?
The first thing you need to learn is Python.
Straightforward.
Right? Which is why my book is called Python and Excel Step by Step. And the reason for this is simple. The AI tools that are out there, Copilot, Excel, ChatGPT, Cloud Code, they're very, very good at generating Python code because they've been trained on the internet's collection of, content about that, blogs and Stack Overflow and that kind of thing. So not surprisingly, they're very good at it, but they're not perfect at it. And especially in the context of analytics, if you issue like an AI prompt, for example, in Copilot Excel or ChatGPT, for example, and it generates Python code behind the scenes, it might make a bunch of assumptions that it doesn't tell you about. So to actually validate those, you actually have to have the raw Python skills in the first place to actually look at the code and say, let's say you're building a forecast. Hey, does this forecast make sense? Do I want to stake my reputation at work on this generated code from AI without looking at it? Probably not. To be able to look at it and verify it, you got to have Python skills at base.
And if you're just joining us for the first time, this is your first episode of Super Data Brothers. This is a live show. This is not pre-recorded. So if you get your comments, questions into the chat, I can actually see them, and I will ask Dave. Like Michael Dunphy here, who asks, it seems like Excel's main limitation is the size of the data that can be analyzed. Is that still the case, or are there improvements there as well?
Okay, so this is a classic, like IT-ish kind of objection to Excel.
Bingo.
One I used to make. And just so everybody's clear, early in my career, I was a dyed-in-the-wool Excel hater. Now I'm a Microsoft Excel MVP. So what happened? Well, we can talk about that later. But anyway, so this is a dyed-in-the-wool IT kind of objection to Excel. And the answer is Microsoft put extra things in Excel, extra capabilities in Excel that got past the 1 million row limitation a long time ago. Power Query, Power Pivot. Python and Excel also has the capability to go past the 1 million row limit, because the way you should think about it is that 1 million rows in Excel is limited to the worksheet. So as long as the data is not landing in the worksheet as part of your pipeline, you have much more capability. So for example, you can source data directly from a relational database using Power Query. That Power Query connection can be accessed by Python and Excel. You bypass the worksheet. So the only limitation you have right now is that the upload download for Python and Excel, because Python and Excel runs in the cloud, the upload download is limited right now to 100 megabytes. Now, that doesn't sound like much, but most of the world's data that's typically being analyzed in Excel, that's plenty.
Yeah.
I've easily tested with 330,000 rows and even more of data flowing directly through the Power Query pipeline into Python and Excel, goes up to the cloud, runs, and the results come back. Works just fine. I mean, there's a certain amount of latency obviously involved with the cloud-based thing, but other than that, it works just fine. And even 330,000 rows, which is about 1/3 the worksheet limit, will often choke Excel depending on what you're doing, especially if you've got a bunch of formulas in there. Python or Excel handles it different.
What is like from a hardware perspective, what is the limitation on that? Is it RAM you need more of in order to get better performance out of Excel?
No, actually, all the Excel actually runs in the Microsoft Cloud. So here's the way it works, right?
Gotcha.
You write your formula in your worksheet, your Python formula. That gets bundled up with your data and pushed up to Azure, the Microsoft Cloud. And then a secure container, a mini computer, if you want to think of it that way, gets spun up. That's completely locked down for security reasons. Gets spun up, runs the code, and then pushes it back down. So your laptop in of itself isn't necessarily the gating limit to the processing. It would be the size of the container. Now, Microsoft does offer the ability to get enhanced processing capability, more, better, faster, a better container for an extra charge.
Yep.
In most of my testing, quite frankly, you don't need it, right? Worst case scenario is you set the timeout limit really, really high, like 2 hours, and you go to lunch and let it run.
Yeah. I mean, it's like me in Cloud Code, right? Sometimes I just say, hey, Opus, take the wheel, right? And just let it go for 45 minutes to see what it did. It's interesting. I think that's very smart on Microsoft's part to have that be the default behavior, and really sounds like the only behavior that it executes in the cloud. I can recall about a decade ago, IBM Cognos added the capability to execute Python within the Cognos platform. And step one to do that was, okay, install your Spark clusters, right? And so literally nobody ever, I don't want to say nobody, I don't know anybody who ever did it, right? Mm-hmm. And for a tool like Excel, which is laser focused on actual end user productivity, not IT problems, but end user productivity, having it by default execute in the cloud it just makes it possible, right? If the user were to have to connect to some server on their own to execute Python, most Excel users wouldn't be able to do that.
Yeah, and this is a really important point, because another IT-ish huge objection to Python and Excel is, you mean it doesn't run locally? And the answer is no. And there's a whole bunch of reasons for it, right? So let me give you an example. And this was from an interaction on LinkedIn in the comment sections of one of my posts. So another Microsoft Excel MVP said, look, I've traditionally used Python, and he works in the accounting space. He's like, I automate accounting processes using Python scripts, ledger reconciliations, that sort of thing. And he's like, now I get why it runs in the cloud, because for people to be able to use my stuff, IT has to give them permission to have Python installed locally. And for most business users and most organizations that are of a certain size or larger, that's usually a non-starter.
Right.
Right. They're not going to let you do it in the first place. But if most of these organizations, which most of, if not all of my clients are also in Azure, it becomes a much easier thing to say, look, we can enable Python in Excel. It runs in a secure container in Azure. We're already in Azure. And everyone's like, man, we can get that approved much easier than a local Python install. And then also, because it's a controlled environment, like a Docker container, essentially, you don't have to worry about version conflicts. Microsoft and Anaconda take care of all that. The stuff just runs. And here's the kicker, because I want to tie this back to the original data volume question, that there's no downside for learning Python and Excel insofar as the code is like 99.9% the same as any Python technology. So let's say you're building a lead scoring model inside of Python and Excel, and for whatever reason, you get past the data limits that you have for whatever reason. Okay. You know Python and Excel, so just go ahead and fire up Jupyter Notebook instead, or VS Code or whatever, and the skills transfer. So there is no downside. You have this trajectory that you can scale. You can start with Python and Excel and move off Python and Excel to a local Python install and whatever technology you want, or spinning up a cloud VM that's got all the bells and whistles, whatever you want. The Python skills move with you.
That's the beauty of this kind of approach. And it's something that I'm glad the tech industry seems to have largely embraced at the enterprise level. You don't have to go back too far, where every enterprise company wanted its own proprietary technology, its own proprietary language. They viewed that as lock-in. And now it's quite the opposite, right? I mean, to have Microsoft, they were the kings of lock-in at one point. And to have the king of lock-in say, no, I'm going to embrace the well-adopted standard is great for everybody. We have some awesome questions from the audience, and I'm going to get to them in a second. But first, I have to thank today's episode sponsor, Good Data. Folks, 2 papers I want you to check out, both written by industry luminary Donald Farmer. The first is about analytics as code. This covers why analytics and business intelligence needs to migrate from kind of a UI-bound workflow to a code-bound workflow that embraces the best of engineering principles, right? If you're not building your BI with engineering in 2026, you're doing it wrong. The second one is the analytics lake. The analytics lake is all about a unified architecture built on DuckDB, Apache Arrow, and a semantic layer that gives you the ability to store data, compute data, and then also run your AI agents all in one plane, right? It's kind of the serving plane for enterprise agentic data agents. Both of these papers are great. I get people every week who say to me, Ryan, I read one of those Donald Farmer papers that you recommended, and it was amazing. So QR codes on the screen, go ahead and download them and check them out. And thank you again to Good Data for sponsoring this week's episode. Okay, David, some questions from the audience, and then we're going to transition to some even spicier topics. So the first one, how does Python and Excel impact collaboration when some users lack Python enabled, or maybe they just have limited technical knowledge? How do people work together, say you're the Python person on the non-Python team?
Right. And this is a great question, but arguably it's just the next flavor of the day in terms of Excel, because think about how many programming languages are already in Excel.
Yeah.
You can argue the formula is a programming language, right? Especially when combined with worksheets. It's basically Turing complete. 2, you got DAX, you got Power Query, M, you got VBA. So this question is nothing new, essentially, right? This idea of like, there's so many technologies and capabilities inside of Excel. Advanced users will often use things that most novice users, if you want to think of them that way, cannot. So the good news is that it's not a new problem. So the best practices there still apply. Secondarily, but most importantly, you can actually share a workbook that has the results of the Python code already run to somebody who doesn't have Python and Excel enabled. So for example, let's say you run a customer segmentation analysis using Python and Excel, and you do all kinds of cool, interesting things, and you spit out a bunch of really cool data viz and all that kind of stuff. You can have all that rendered inside the workbook, save it off, email to your boss. They can open it up, even though they don't have Python and Excel access or skills, and they can see the results. What they can't do is run the code. And there is an argument to be made that's probably a good thing, right?
Yeah.
Essentially allows you to create a static snapshot. But once again, this whole idea of collaboration with advanced aspects of Excel has been around for a really, really long time. Even, for example, just using formulas, right? I've seen these monstrous workbooks created like many, many years ago by actuaries when I worked at an insurance company. And you just couldn't give that to like an underwriter and expect them to understand what's going on. It's just way too complex. So this problem's been around for a long time in Excel.
I think, and thank you, Rohan Kapoor, for the question. Now we have Manish Dabas, who kind of asked the logical follow-up, how do I manage version hell, right, in Excel? And I don't know if you have any recommendations for this. I can vividly remember attempting to manage this with SharePoint at one point in my career. Now it's been a long time, and I'm not up on the advancements in terms of SharePoint and Excel health management. So, what's the best practice here?
Well, there are plenty of best practices, and that once again, this problem has existed in Excel for a long time. Python and Excel doesn't make this a new problem. It's been in Excel a long time. It's similar to any type of problem that you have in terms of some sort of tool, broadly accessible tool for doing analytics. In the Python world, Jupyter Notebook is often kind of maligned for precisely this reason, right? Because you'll see like memes where you'll have basically the same naming convention that you see for Excel workbooks, right? V1, V2, V3, V4, V4, Master 1, Master 2, Master 3 on the Jupyter Notebooks. So this problem is not new. What is unrealistic, quite frankly, and this is where I get spicy. And by the way, folks, I'm a former software engineer and software architect. Okay. I understand version control. I understand software engineering practices and all that. You're just going to have to give it up.
Yeah.
You're going to have to give it up. I'm sorry. It's one of the things I had to give up when I moved out of software engineering and in analytics about 14, 15 years ago. Excel's not going anywhere. You're going to pry it from finance's cold, dead hands. Okay. So you're just going to have to get around this. Yes, you should implement a versioning strategy. Use the same practices that have been around for a long time for Excel. They equally apply to Python and Excel. But here's the thing. Trying to block your business users from trying to get answers to their questions in Excel has failed for decades and is going to fail for years to come. So just give it up.
Amen. Give it up. I got to tell you, David, I gave it up in 2016. I can remember the year. I can remember when it happened, where I was just like, you know what? I am going to give you the download to Excel button on that BI report because that's what you need. And there's this idea, and I think we have a good question from Michael Dunphy that I'll tie to. But look, if you're out there and your goal is to get rid of Excel and people will only use our BI or analytics tool, I would invite you to read the Greek myth of Sisyphus. Okay, this is never going to happen.
That's the guy with the boulder, right?
That's the guy with the boulder. Okay, this is never going to happen. Now you're going to push that boulder up the hill; it's going to roll back down every time. And as Davis has told us, look, Excel's footprint is getting bigger, not smaller. The number of things that you can do in it is only growing. And we've, for a long time, people have been trying to do BI tasks in it, but now you can do data science tasks, legit data science tasks in it as well. And so I agree with Dave wholeheartedly. Put something in place to try to version it, but your job is to support it, right? Not to try to snuff it out. It's better to be someone's friend than enemy. You'll have way more influence over what they do in that situation. And that kind of leads me to, Michael's question. There's this class of tools. Sigma's the big one that's getting a lot of waves right now. So Michael asks, what are your thoughts on Sigma, creating the Excel of BI that's more suited to analysts used to working in spreadsheets? I don't know how familiar you are with Sigma computing.
I'm not familiar with Sigma.
Okay.
But I am familiar with this idea that there's going to be an AI killer or that kills off Excel. There's going to be this thing that kills off Excel. So just so you guys know, I've been in technology for 28 plus years, and there's every few years, there's going to be a SQL killer or an Excel killer or this killer or that killer. How many of these killers actually end up completing their nefarious goal?
Exactly.
So good luck to Sigma. I'm not familiar with them. But here's my experience, quite frankly. Good luck.
Sigma is an interesting tool. They really, they basically are kind of, it's a BI tool, but their approach was, what if the heart of the BI tool was Excel? So the heart of the interface is a spreadsheet. You can use Excel logic and language within it, but it's got BI stuff built around it, scheduling and versioning and access management. And they're doing very well, I think, from a business perspective. So good luck to them.
Yeah, but think of it this way, right? COBOL still drives a huge chunk of the global economy running on mainframes. You can say the same thing about Excel. So if COBOL is still running on IBM mainframes, you think you're going to be able to get rid of all that Excel too? I don't think so.
I mean,
it's not going to happen.
Look at IBM's financial statements, right? The company is still, those mainframes pay for the company to this day.
Yeah.
We did have this question from YouTube. So folks, if you're not familiar with us, if this is your first time here, especially if you're watching on LinkedIn, we simulcast on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Substack, and Twitch, actually, although nobody watches there. So
Just because you're not doing Fortnite.
Yeah, I know. We just put Fortnite like scrolling on the bottom of the screen as we talk, and then we'll get way more viewers. Hop over to LinkedIn, superdataBrothers, or YouTube. Hop over to YouTube, youtube.com/c/superdataBrothers, and give us a like, follow, and subscribe there. If this is the type of thing you like, we do this every Thursday at 12 o'clock. And while you're clicking links, get a copy of Dave's book, Python in Excel Step by Step. Link is available on the screen. I will go ahead and paste it into the comments as well, so that you can go straight there. Let me just grab it. So this book, I mean, this is really the step-by-step guide, right, to do the types of things we're talking about in this episode. So check out the book. Link will be in the description of the video. It was on the screen if you're watching live, and I pasted it onto YouTube and Twitch. So go get a copy of it. And figure out how to do this stuff, because I think the moral of the story so far is not only can you not stop this, you should probably embrace it.
Yeah. And by the way, the last question that you flashed up around egress costs.
Yep.
So as of right now, Python and Excel is included in a Microsoft 365 or whatever they're calling it now subscription. And there are no associated ingress and egress costs at this point. It's included as part of your subscription.
That's awesome.
If you want enhanced compute, faster compute in the cloud, then there's an add-on subscription, but most of the time you don't really need it.
Microsoft has gotten very good at giving you enough free that you want to keep going.
Yeah, there's some sort of like thing that goes, the first hit is free kind of thing.
Exactly. That's the story in BI is, the last 5 years, and at the enterprise level at least, is Power BI slowly eating the world. Mm-hmm. And it's for the same reason. It's a very good tool, and Microsoft will give you a lot of capabilities at a very low or even sometimes free price. And so, it sounds like what they're doing with Excel and Python is almost the gateway drug to both more Azure compute and also to your career as a Python programmer.
Yeah, and it's great that you brought up Power BI, because, for example, one of my clients is a financial services company, and they've spent the past 3 years rolling out Power BI, and they've had a traditional BI infrastructure. They still run Crystal reports in production.
Yeah, haven't heard that in a while.
Yeah, but it's still there. Cognos, all that kind of stuff is still there.
They still work.
Yeah, so they made a massive investment to roll Power BI out, and from the get-go, they essentially said, look, there is no way that we're going to prevent our business users from using Excel. So they built and designed their BI rollout from the get-go to give Excel downloads, to export data, because they knew that making a diagnostic dashboard that is sufficiently powerful to allow business users just to stay in Power BI and slice and dice the data to answer all the potential questions that they want would be so complex that they would never even use it. And they would just ask for the Excel download anyway. So they just started with that. They're obviously in a Microsoft shop, they're in Azure, and they are all over Copilot in Excel, Python in Excel as well, for precisely that reason, because they're going to give their customers, their business stakeholders, the ability to download curated enterprise quality data sets directly from Power BI. And then they want them to have the ability to analyze them. And what they're doing is, instead of fighting it, they're partnering with their business stakeholders to use it more effectively.
This is truly the only way. If you're on an analytics or BI team, this is the only way. This is to embrace this. If you fight it at your peril, okay? Fight it at your peril. Now, you mentioned Copilot. Lance, asking on YouTube, has this question, and I think this transitions us a little bit to the Copilot topic. Doing data analysis in AI is a hot topic. Indeed, I'm writing a book about it, Lance. Look for more information on that coming up soon. But there is an artifact management and auditing problem, also a big issue. Mm-hmm. he likes the idea of Excel being an auditable artifact where you can actually see what Copilot or Claude did. And I think that, maybe you can use that as a bridge to talk about Copilot in Excel a little bit. But I am very interested in that, almost Excel as the deterministic layer underpinning whatever it is that the AI did. You can at least look and see it and see how it evolved over time.
Yeah. So this is a great question, because if maybe folks aren't aware of this, there is a new function in Excel, a new standard Microsoft Excel function called Copilot. And you can actually essentially put that in one of your cells, equals Copilot, parentheses, and then inside the parentheses, you put like a prompt. And it literally runs Copilot, runs the AI behind the scenes, an LLM, and does whatever you ask it. And if you go look at the documentation on Microsoft's website for this function, it tells you specifically the scenarios where it should not be used. Anytime you need reproducibility, aka financial calculations, you shouldn't use it for exactly, I think, what the person who asked the question was getting at. So here's the thing. Because LLMs are non-deterministic, right? Even if you write the best, most in-depth prompt that you possibly can in Copilot and Excel and run it multiple times, you're going to get different outputs. It's not always guaranteed you're going to get exactly the same output. So here's what you do instead. This is where Python and Excel is so awesome. You actually use the Copilot to generate something that is reproducible, aka Python code, in your workbook. And that gives you the full audit trail. For example, let's say you work in finance and you want to build a data-driven forecast. You don't want to use the forecast DDS function in Excel because it's not powerful enough. You want to use Surima, for example, or Surima Max instead, which is available in Python and Excel. You can actually ask Copilot to generate the Python code to do that, and then you can actually paste it in as a Python function, and then you have reproducibility in your workbook, step by step. Now, unfortunately, right now, there used to be a cooler feature that was available in Excel, but Microsoft killed it in their infinite wisdom. And by the way, just so people know, I worked at Microsoft for 8 years, so I've worked inside the big house. And I'm in Microsoft Excel MVP, but I'll tell you straight out what I think. They did something dumb. They killed off a bunch of features recently in Excel in favor of what they're calling agent mode. Agent mode is not fully baked yet. So some of the coolest features that we had before have now gone. They're going to come back, but we're going to have to wait for them. One of which was a Copilot mode in Excel that essentially you can think of it as being the Python and Excel mode. It would literally, you would chat with it and it would generate Python and Excel code and inject that right directly in your worksheet, which was awesome. Now they'll probably get back there eventually. I'm not sure when. But that functionality is gone. But that's obviously the future of Microsoft as Microsoft sees it. Python also provides reproducibility. So use AI to generate reproducible stuff. Don't use the AI to do poof magic that you can't reproduce reliably.
100%. That's before we went on the air, I was kind of telling you about my side project that I'm doing with data analysis right now. And even it's so tempting with these AI tools to just let it rip. And I learned that lesson, even though I know the lesson. I had to relearn it myself just yesterday when I built this whole process to do some data analysis in DuckDB. And then at the end of 3 hours of work, I realized I had not done the deterministic backstop to ensure that what I was getting was accurate and all my data was junk. And so that's really what it's about, I would say. Whether you're working in Copilot in Excel or using Claude or whatever, you can, for unimportant data exploration, sure, you can just let the LLM do stuff, right? But you still need to build into that process some checks, some sanity checks. But anything that's really important, have the LLM build something that you can run anytime and always get the same answer. That's just critically important. You can't go into Claude every Monday and say, produce the board report, okay? The board report has to be something that is the same every time. And maybe Claude triggers a Python script, okay? If that's how you want to do it, and that Python script builds the board report, okay, fine, right? Yeah. But you can't let Claude make it up every time because Claude will make it up sometimes.
Good luck telling the SEC. Sorry.
Exactly.
Our quarterlies were wrong because we used an LLM.
Yeah.
Somebody's going to jail.
Exactly. So a couple good comments here. So we have one from typical show co-host Eric Dolly, who is joining us remotely today. He says, hey, at least if you do the BI in Excel, then you never have to get the classic very nice. How can I get this in Excel? Just
right?
shortcut that whole process.
I mean, those of us who've been in the biz for a long time, Crystal Reports, Cognos,
Yeah.
SQL Server reporting services, these all had Excel capabilities, export capabilities a decade ago. There's a reason for that.
Yep. And then we have David Marmer. Actually, fun fact, David Marmer, friend of the show, was once the product executive in charge of Cognos. So good to have you here, David. He says his advice: meet the user where they are, augment Excel, don't fight it. So this is from an longtime industry leader here.
And that's exactly the transformation that happened with me when I moved out of software and hardcore tech, if you want to think of it that way, and more in analytics, which has a technical aspect, of course, but it's not software engineering per se. You have to meet the users where they are, because the whole point of all of this in the end is better decision making, right? And if the users aren't going to use your dashboard for whatever reason or report for whatever reason, but they will use Excel, isn't getting the best data-driven decision really the point, not what technology is being used?
Yeah. Why do you think people are like that? Why are we so precious about not using Excel?
Because, I mean, the answer I believe is simple, and this is based on 28 plus years in technology. Microsoft Excel is the hammer. It's the proverbial hammer, and everything becomes a nail. People use Excel constantly for things that it shouldn't be used for because they don't have any other skills at their disposal. Or they don't want to wait for IT, or they can't get budget for an IT project or whatever it might be to actually build the thing that they need. So they just use Excel. That's basically it. Now, I used to get extremely ragey about this, right? About Excel and, this is terrible. Like the actuary workbook I mentioned earlier, right? It was huge. It was gargantuan. It was basically an entire app built inside of, Excel with a VBA code. I'm like, why didn't you buy that built as an IT system? And the answer was, we couldn't get budget for it. So we built it ourselves, right? So that's how I kind of got to meeting people where they are. I just didn't have any way around it. I'm like, look, rather than trying to fight Excel as a tool, teach people how to use it better. Yes, it gets used for things that it shouldn't be, but I can't stop that. It's like trying to hold back the tide. So just let it go.
Yeah.
not to sound like Frozen.
I had a lot of that in my house a couple of years ago. So a couple more questions, both from YouTube. We'll take this one first. Is there a way to embed Excel workbooks in a public site without needing authorization?
Don't know.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, never had to work on that use case. I can't imagine if you have SharePoint or whatever they call it now.
Yeah.
You probably couldn't do that, because I actually have done that with some of my clients where they actually share workbooks with me. But it's not necessarily quote unquote a public website.
Yeah. That would have to be the way to do it. I have Claude Vibe code it. There's the answer. Michael Dunphy asks, and you may be able to address this, you may not. I don't know. But do you know the differences between, say, Excel and Google Sheets? And Michael makes the point, all the kids use Google Sheets, and Excel is for us old heads.
No, it's not. So the easiest way to think about it is, if you're a casual user, there's not much difference between the two. But if you're doing anything, basically more hardcore data analysis, financial modeling, that sort of thing, Excel's way more feature rich than Google Sheets. So if the younger people aren't actually doing anything with data, it probably suits them just fine. But if they actually want to build, for example, a data-driven forecast in Google Sheets, for example, you have the solver in Excel, which can be used for all manner of analytics, both predictive and prescriptive. And Google doesn't have anything equivalent, at least last time I checked anyway.
So what is the most powerful thing you've seen done by combining Excel and Python?
Marketing analytics, great use case for this. So customer segmentation, forecasting, lead scoring, all those sorts of things. Everything that has direct line of sight to churn prediction, everything that has direct line of sight to revenue and profit. There's tons of use cases in the finance space in particular, not the least of which is way better data-driven forecasting than what you can get out of native Excel.
And can you talk us through a little bit about what people will learn in the book? Where does it start and where do they wind up?
Yeah, so one of the first things you have to know is that Python got its start as a general purpose programming language. The way I like to phrase it is it was built by software engineers for software engineers. As it gained in popularity, they bolted on other capabilities over time. For example, it became the de facto standard in analytics and data science because of all the extra libraries that were built for it, but those were all added afterwards. So the reason why I bring this all up is because when you learn Python for Excel, you're actually learning a subset of Python, the Python that's related to data, if you want to think of it that way. So what this book is all about is taking your existing Excel knowledge, things like functions and tables and pivot tables and all that kind of stuff, and then mapping it to the similar equivalents in Python, but always keeping a focus on the subset of Python related to data. So you'll learn to write your own functions and do essentially ifs, just like you do if you have to use the if function in Excel. So that's one of those conditionals, right? The basic looping structures for doing the same code over and over again. And most importantly, you're going to learn about pandas, which is the library in Python that works with entire tables of data, which isn't nearly as intimidating as you might think because Excel users already know about working with tables.
Yeah.
They live and breathe tables. So it's like mapping things like everything you know. Like, for example, a VLOOKUP on a table column in Excel is essentially the equivalent of what's known as a left join or a merge in Python. So mapping that and teaching you all the foundation. It doesn't teach any analytics because you got to crawl, walk, run. So the crawling is actually learning the base Python foundation you need. And then that allows you then to move on to the next step, which is better forecasting or segmentation analysis or predictive modeling or whatever it might be.
What level of Excel expertise would you say someone should have to get the most out of the book?
Not as much as you might think. Do you know tables? Do you understand how to filter tables? Do you understand cell formats? Right? Why is your date showing up as 41,137 instead of the date? If you know about that. Basic functions, ifs, sum if, those kinds of functions, right? Just the average, the generic Excel functions. Pivot tables, nothing advanced, right? You don't have to know how to build dashboards in Excel with pivot tables or anything like that. Just do you know how to create a pivot table? And VLOOKUP. Just off the top of my head, if you know those things, which is actually a relatively low bar for most Excel users, then you've got enough background knowledge, you have enough foundation to then map what you know about Excel to make learning Python much, much easier. Once again, the subset for data.
Folks, the book is Python in Excel Step by Step by David Langer. Link on the screen and available in the show notes. I will go ahead and paste it into the comments too if you've just joined us. This is the type of thing we do every Thursday at 12 o'clock. We interview experts like Dave on data topics to help you level up your game, get better in your career, and understand what's happening in the data world because, man, is stuff changing fast right now. So join us next week for the same sort of thing. Okay, we've got a couple more comments, and then here's a question. So it doesn't appear that there's Excel integration with R. Mm-hmm. Do you have any insight if this is on Microsoft's roadmap? Do you see this happening anytime soon?
Okay, so this is a great question because for those of you that might have know my history on LinkedIn or whatever, I was an R guy. I love R. I think R is great for hands-on analytics work. It didn't win in the marketplace.
Yeah.
So this is a very good question because Power BI actually supports both R and Python. My understanding is, this is a Microsoft Excel MVP. As far as I know, there is no talk about creating similar capabilities for both R and Python in Excel as they exist in Power BI presently. And the answer is pretty simple. Python won in the marketplace. And if you want to think about it this way as well, there's a lot more Python content on the interwebs that could be used to train LLMs, aka Copilot, than there is R. So it kind of makes sense just to stick with Python for those two reasons.
Michael made the point earlier that from his perspective, Excel is really used by older people and Google Sheets by younger people, which you disputed. But I do think this is true between R and Python.
Maybe.
I think if you're an R expert, you tend to be of a certain vintage. And that's just a function of, look, this is how the technology marketplace works, right?
Yeah.
Things have their time passes. Someday, maybe Python's time will pass. Although I did see an interesting conjecture that LLMs may have the effect of kind of slowing down the change in these technologies, because the advantage of the corpus of knowledge on the internet for something like Python, when it comes to training LLMs, will be very hard for a new language to supplant, right? Just because the LLMs themselves have had access to so much Python, they're so good at it. And as we hand more and more off to the LLMs, the incentive to come up with some new language that's better than Python in some way will decrease, because the LLM won't know how to write it.
Yeah. And there's a couple things I want to talk about there. So first up, just back to this whole age thing for spreadsheets, a 25-year-old financial analyst working for a large corporation, I'd be willing to bet $1,000 they're using Microsoft Excel. Not
I think that's a safe bet.
Okay. So, and the reason why I bring this up is because there are still market segments. For example, R is quite large in the pharmaceutical industry. For example, because there are certain FDA regulatory requirements, and they used to use SAS instead for all these regulatory requirements, and now they're starting to move to R. So there are pockets where these things are not necessarily true in terms of the generalization I made earlier. Mm-hmm. Similarly, with the generalization of younger people use Google Sheets and older people use Excel. Well, no, depends on where the younger person works and what they're doing. Right. Now, getting back to your other point around languages, it's going to be interesting to see how this all evolves, because obviously you could make an argument that like the end state at a certain point, not AGI, artificial general intelligence, that's obviously the end state, taking that off the table. The end state with LLMs, the current generation, is they don't even bother generating interim layers. They go directly to machine code. Essentially, they become compilers.
Yeah.
You provide the specification in natural language, and they just basically just write machine level code directly. Now, if you think of it that way, then yeah, programming languages can potentially go the way of the dodo. Unfortunately, for that to actually be realistic in the real world, to essentially say like, hey, I'm Apple and I want to rewrite Mac OS using an AI that generates, our ARM-based processor code directly. Yeah. Who's reading the machine language to make sure that it's actually correct, right? Back to that traceability, audibility comment earlier. So we'll have to see how this all evolves. I don't know how it's going to evolve, to be quite frank. I think in the near term, you can't go wrong with Python, learning Python, because once again, it won in the marketplace. And to your point, most of the LLMs have been trained on vast quantities of Python data and examples to begin with.
Yeah, they're just good at it. We see this even in BI. You look at BI tools, the more popular BI tools circa 2024 have better LLM support, because there was just a lot more on Stack Overflow.
I'd imagine, for example, the LLM support's probably pretty good for DAX, for example, right? Lots of stuff written about DAX in Power BI and in Excel as well.
Absolutely. So a couple more comments here. First, it looks like we have someone from the TM1 Mafia here. TM1 people represent TM1 harder than anybody I've ever met. So Lawson asks, if you have any experience using Excel with TM1, and if you do, what's your assessment? TM1 people often say that if you know how to use Excel, then you know how to use TM1.
I don't know what TM1 is.
There you go. It's actually, there's a really interesting documentary if you want to learn about it. TM1 was invented, I think, in the late 60s. It eventually got acquired by Cognos, which of course got acquired by IBM. I think what TM1 is like a multi-dimensional database. And what's most interesting about it is probably the performance is still just ridiculously good for such an old technology. I think it was Uber. I was at a conference one time, and I think it was Uber was like, we have like 45 quadrillion tuples or something in our TM1 database, and then performance is still really good. It got used a lot and still gets used a lot in finance in particular. So I know there's like a TM1 Excel interface where you can be in Excel and access data in TM1, which is probably the genesis of the question. Eric makes the point, I think any language or tech that was big and hype when LLMs hit will be able to keep so much momentum. He used Vercel for a website he made. Why? Because ChatGPT told him to. As a famous philosopher said, the tradition of all dead generations weighs like a nightmare on the brains of the living. Exactly, Eric. Exactly. Okay. So I appreciate, first of all, Dave, that you said I don't know where this is going, because anybody who says they do gets an instant demerit on the Super Data Brothers show, because nobody knows where this is going, and anybody who claims they do is trying to sell you something or trying to make themselves look good.
Okay.
But with that said, where's it all going, Dave? What from Microsoft's perspective, at least, what's on the Excel roadmap that might be interesting to people who are kind of more on the data analytics, data science side?
Yeah, and so obviously there's stuff I can't talk about because it's under NDA.
Absolutely.
As an Excel MVP. So I can talk about the stuff that's publicly released. So I mentioned, for example, Microsoft took a bunch of Copilot Excel functionality out of Excel recently in favor of what they're calling agent mode. Now, if folks in the audience are familiar with Claude, makers of Claude Code, they also have an Excel plugin. And essentially, the whole idea is basically this. Anything people do of any sort of like, that requires a serious amount of effort inside of Excel using native Excel functionality, they want you to be able to interact with an AI with natural language, and it produces everything for you. For example, in the finance industry, 3-statement models, right? Income, balance sheet, and what was the last one? I can't remember, but there's 3 of them, right?
Yeah.
And they're integrated. And these guys and finance people spend a lot of time building these and modifying them. And there's other types of financial models for like, M&A and things like that. The idea is that you'll use AI and it'll just generate those for you, right? Now, obviously, I'm sure financial people are quaking in their boots, just like a lot of software people are quaking in their boots with what Cloud Code can do in terms of like, hey, wait a second, I'm a crafts person and you're telling me AI is going to take the craft away? Yeah, that's kind of the goal, right? That's kind of the goal. So they're going to invest in agent mode. There's also been public release that Microsoft's moving away from their dependency on OpenAI, the makers of ChatGPT. They want to move most likely to their own AI models. I mean, they're a huge company. Why wouldn't they, right? So I think that's what's going to end up happening is that the future is going to be in the Excel space in particular. It's going to be more about AI, using AI to, if you will, handle the syntax, right? So you don't have to be a function expert anymore like a lot of financial modelers are, right? They know all these functions and how to build all these complicated spreadsheets, which is akin to software engineers knowing syntax and building object-oriented systems and all that kind of thing. More of that's going to get automated. That's the goal. That's where they want to go. And right now, the models aren't super awesome at the financial stuff, but neither were the LLMs at generating code. And we can see now, especially with Claude Code, recent editions of Claude Code, people are like, holy cow, this can actually do quite a bit. So that's going to be the future. And what does that mean for folks? It's not about mechanics anymore, if you want to think of it that way. It's about insights. It's about analysis. It's about data analysis. It's not about knowing 100 Excel functions. It's not necessarily knowing about like how to navigate a Power BI dashboard anymore. It's literally like saying, look, can I partner with the AI and get results from the data? I'm essentially being freed up from some level of the mechanics so that I can do higher level thinking. And this is certainly true. So far I've seen, like, for example, I send out weekly an email newsletter where I do analytics tutorials, and I use Python and Excel for most of them. And usually what I end up doing in the last part of a tutorial series is providing a bunch of AI prompts, because once you learn the analytics, you don't have to write the code by hand anymore. You can write prompts that are specific enough that you can generate code that actually works well, and you can tweak it if you need to, or correct the AI. And I think that's where things are going. It's going to be more about, rather than knowing the raw technical aspects, the mechanistic aspects of things, can you actually think at a higher level? And do you know analytics? Can you actually extract value from data?
100%. Yeah, I agree. That's a big part of the book I'm working on right now, is about that process. And how do you, as an analytics or business intelligence person, move away from, hey, my value is I know Power BI really well, and into my value is that I can understand the business need and document it and communicate it to the model in such a way that it can build what we need. And I'm savvy enough to prevent it from going off the rails, right? That's really what the point of the book is about. And a lot of that, from my perspective, when it comes to kind of building a system for others to consume rather than just answering a one-off question, it has to do with product thinking and having the right documentation in the right way and having the smart prompt templates and that sort of thing. And then when you have all that in place, today what the LLMs can do, with Opus 4.6, which I've been playing around with since it came out, I mean, it's incredible, really. I've accomplished things. It would have taken me months to learn how to do, say, the data analysis project I did yesterday in an afternoon, because I'm just not that good at Python, right? But Claude's great, But if you fail at telling Claude what to do, you're still going to fail at the stage we're in right now. David Marmer reminds us that cash flow is the third statement. Thank you, David.
Thank you, David.
Thank you very much.
A little bit of a senior moment there. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I blanked on it too. So we have about 10 minutes left, folks. If you like this sort of thing, we are here every Thursday having these types of conversations with industry experts like Dave. And so tune in next week, same time, 12 o'clock Eastern on Thursday on LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch, and Substack. Wherever you like to watch, that's where we broadcast, except X. Not going to get on X. Yeah.
No comment.
Yeah, no comment. And if Dave has taught you something today, and I guarantee he has, pick up his book. So Python in Excel, step by step. It was recently launched from Wiley. It's an awesome resource for you to go from an Excel wizard to a Python wizard. Actually, David, the thing that I like most about this book is actually I think it can be such a useful bridge to Python for someone. It's just based on how you've written it. When you analogize these things that can be done in Python to how to do them in Excel, it just, I can see how it creates such a clear scaffold for someone who's good at Excel but doesn't know anything about Python to understand that maybe it's not as intimidating as they think. And the things that they already know are useful, and they just need to learn kind of a different way of expressing them, right? So pick up a copy of the book, link you can see on the screen, and it will be in the show notes after the show today. All right. 7 minutes left. What do you think first of all, what's the biggest lesson you've learned over the course of your career? Like, you've clearly made some pivots here. Mm-hmm. Well, what have you learned over that time?
Business stakeholders don't care about technology.
Boy, they don't.
They don't care about your technical virtuosity. They do not care. First, when I was a software engineer, and then later as a software architect, they didn't care if I designed a beautiful domain-driven object-oriented system. They didn't care. They didn't care. They didn't care. Did you deliver it on time and on budget with the features that we agreed on? That's what all they cared about. When I moved into analytics, they didn't care whether I used a boosted decision tree algorithm or if I used market basket analysis. They didn't care. They only cared about the actionable results. And here's the thing too. More often than not, they didn't even actually care about the quality, if you will, quote unquote, of the analytics that's produced. As long as it was good enough for them to make an informed decision on a fast enough timeline, that's all they care about. And that was hard for me, right? Because back in the day, I used to be a C++ bigot, right? So I had Bjorn Stroustrup's book on my nightstand. I would read it at night before I went to bed. And I was like, I'm a crafts person. I craft code. I am awesome. I know everything ins and out. I know why you need a virtual destructor, blah, 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 blah. Nobody cares. Technical people care. Technical interviewers care. But business people, they don't care. So that was the biggest thing for me, is like getting to this space, and moving in analytics really drove it home for me. Really, it really did, where they're like, just give me an insight. Give me an insight fast. Tell me how to make a better decision. I'm a VP. The CEO's breathing down my neck because revenues are down. Let's say you're the VP of marketing. What can the data tell me to do differently to try and change this around, right? That's all they care about. So from that perspective, they don't care if you use Excel or R or Python or whatever. They just don't care. So just pick the tool that works. As somebody said earlier, meet the business where they are.
Yep.
And quite frankly, one of the things I also had to learn quite painfully is, if the results show up in an Excel workbook, they tend to be more trusted by business stakeholders than in any other format. So for example, if you have Python coded in a workbook and Python coded in a Jupyter notebook, they're going to tend to trust the workbook more because they're familiar with Excel. So
Yeah.
why not just use that?
I was trying to come up with a cute phrase to describe that. The best I came up with was if you build it bespoke, you will be broke. It doesn't quite work. That's absolutely right. I mean, I can think of many times when, over the course of my career, when Excel was the preferred communication medium, and the fact, like, where was the data source? Nobody cared, right? They ultimately didn't care, and that's really what caused me to kind of embrace your way of thinking, like I mentioned in 26. Perry here asks, can you repost Dave Langer's book in Amazon? I could not search and find it. Yes. Perry, let me drop that link into the chat here again for you. If you follow this link, you should find it. So what are you watching on LinkedIn? You should see it in LinkedIn and be able to click on it there. If you just search Python and Excel step by step, it should come up.
If you search Python and Excel on Amazon, actually 2 books come up. Mine, and there's another one as well. So
yeah, don't buy the other one.
Well, I'm not saying that.
I'll do the shilling for you, Dave.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Where can I find an advanced schedule from upcoming shows, Lance? Great question. I still don't have a website yet because I'm lazy. So I will post something on LinkedIn for the advanced schedule.
Just Claude code it. What are you doing?
I know. I could have it done this afternoon.
Right.
I got to work on that book though.
There you go. Yeah.
And Perry makes a comment, when Excel came on the screen, it was light years ahead of the game. I remember Lotus 1-2-3.
Yeah, I'm old enough that my dad had Lotus 1-2-3 on our IBM clone back in the 80s. So
yeah.
Yeah.
I think I think my first experience in school was with Lotus and WordPerfect. That's what we learned on.
Yeah, I had WordPerfect.
Yeah.
On Amiga 500.
Woo,
Amiga 500.
there we go.
Yeah. I'm old. Okay. this gray was well earned, man.
David, you've been a great guest. Thank you for joining me here. Where can people follow you?
LinkedIn's the best place. I do have a YouTube channel, but I'm not very active on YouTube anymore. You can blame the algorithm for that. LinkedIn's a great place to find me. I'm also on Threads, but mostly I'm on LinkedIn. That's the best place.
Yeah, the YouTube algorithm can be very fickle.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Great. Well, Dave, thanks for joining me today. And listen, pick up a copy of Dave's book. It's really good. So you've been a great guest. And thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me on. Had a great time.
All right, folks, there you have it. Python and Excel, Step by Step by David Langer. Get your copy wherever it is that you buy books. And look, I think for me, the biggest takeaway from all the wisdom Dave shared today was embrace it. We've been fighting, if you're in analytics or business intelligence, you've been fighting against Excel, some of you for decades. I get it. I understand why you want to do that. I once did it too, but the time has come to surrender and embrace what Excel can do for you. Your users want to use it. They know it. They love it. Help them, and they will help you. I will tell you, when I made this shift in my attitude, it changed my relationship with my end users a lot. When they came to me and they said, I really need you to automate this data extraction, and yeah, I'll take a report, but can the report have the download to Excel button on it? And instead of fighting against them, I said, yeah, no problem. Suddenly they came to me more often and we had fewer arguments. So embrace Excel and you will win in your data and analytics practice. Okay, folks, you've been a great audience truly this week. So many new faces. Follow us on all the different socials, YouTube especially. And until next week, I am Ryan. And Eric hopefully will join us next week. We are the Super Data Brothers. Take care, everybody.